Hi, welcome to Creative Cow's DSLR Essentials podcast. My name is Rich Harrington.
And I'm Robbie Carmen.
And today we're going to complete our series on time-lapse.
Yep.
So this is part 3, how you assemble the time-lapse shot.
Yeah, so we've already covered gear that you're going to need. We've covered a little bit about shooting techniques when you're out there actually doing the time-lapse. And now we're going to bring it all together. We've got our images. We've, used our gear to get great images. And now we're going to put it together.
Yeah, and if you skip those parts, be sure to go back and watch them because time-lapse is just as much about how you shoot it as how you post it.
Absolutely. You can get some pretty bad time-lapse if you don't shoot it well.
Yeah. So here I'm going to show you a couple of shots,
okay,
and we're going to put it all together using Adobe Bridge and then Adobe After Effects.
Okay.
So pretty straightforward stuff. Here is sort of the end result. It's a shot of the Space Needle in Seattle.
Cool.
And we shot this at sunset using the techniques we talked about earlier. And we're seeing, it's getting darker over time. The clouds are blowing in, traffic's flowing by.
You get that nice flickering of the lights there as people turn on the lights as the day goes by. That's cool.
Yeah, and this is the traffic being reflected in the sides of the building.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to find the right frame rate, so we actually got the blinking of the lights still. So
yep,
I actually shot at a relatively high frame rate. And we can see that if we head on over to Bridge. So I can go in here and take a look and see the relative metadata about the shot.
Yep. So
the times are actually off. My camera was on East Coast time. I was shooting on West Coast
okay,
time. So it's actually 9:40 at night, but this is in the summer, late sunset.
Gotcha.
And you see there that these are 4-second intervals.
Okay.
So pretty straightforward.
Snap, snap, snap. Yep.
Yeah. So we're using Bridge here. It's a nice way to get organized. And
Bridge is a great way to just preview files in general, too. I mean, instead of having to open them up, all of them in Photoshop or something, you can easily peruse them right here.
Yeah, you get a nice large preview there as you see that. You can step on through. One of the things that people like to sort of get rid of, I'm just using the right arrow here to step through, is sometimes they find it distracting if a bird was flying through the frame, pops in real quick, or maybe an airplane.
Yep.
So if you're going through and you find a shot you don't want to use, Command Delete, boom, it's out of the folder.
Cool.
So just duplicate the folder, so you get all your shots in one folder, duplicate it, so you've got your originals in case you screw something up.
Of course, that's always safety.
Go through, delete away any frames you don't want.
Okay.
Now, I've already done that, but again, it's just a simple Command Delete, and that just blows it away, puts it in the trash.
Got it.
Okay. So we're good there. We've found all our files. If I want to sort of preview this, I can go ahead and crank this up. And what I'm going to do is just make this middle window bigger.
Okay.
And one thing that a lot of folks want to know right away is my time-lapse shot going to work? So you could sort of just park it in here.
And you could even if you had the time, you could have done this in the field, right?
Yeah.
Done a couple, a
I do it all the time.
5-minute test or something like that. Brought it into Bridge and go, all right, I like the framing. I think this interval is going to work. That kind of thing.
And by bringing it in, you don't even have to import it. You can just pop the memory card in. Look at it right off the memory card.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool.
So if I just push the down arrow here, it's going to go between frames. Now, it's going to temporarily drop quality, but I could see the motion.
There you go. So you're just going through, this is flying through all these various frames.
Yeah.
Dropping quality a little bit, but you still get a good idea of the passage of time, the lights flickering, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I get a pretty good idea of what that time-lapse is going to look like. So that's my down and dirty preview.
Okay.
And when I'm happy with it, I say, yeah, that's working, I got the right number of shots, then you're pretty good to go. Now, one of the things I'd say is if you dropped frames, it's not a bad idea to rename these frames.
Okay.
So I could select everything and say Tools, Batch Rename.
Okay.
And I say, you know what, this is great, keep them in the same folder. Let's call this Seattle, Space Needle.
Okay.
And keep the date created, add an underscore, and put a 4-digit sequence number.
Okay.
So now, instead of these
Well, you probably don't need that additional underscore then, do you?
No, I do.
Okay.
It's putting it there between that and the date created.
Gotcha.
So, and I'm looking at that and say, that's good. And if I rename those, it's going to go ahead and rename them. But the original file name is embedded. So if you ever had,
if you had to go back to the original stuff, you could always find it again. Cool.
Like if maybe you had a bad JPEG, like it temporarily
you didn't notice a bird flying through on one of the shots or something like that, you could always go back.
Yeah, you can go back and find it. I'll just click rename, and these shots are very quickly batch renamed with that new name, and that's going to make it easier when I import it as an image sequence because it's going to have a clean sequence.
Right.
So the first frame is going to be called frame 1.
Right. So the numbering attaches itself to whatever frame it is in the final product.
Yeah. So if you were like, let's say you're on frame 15, and all of a sudden you did have a bad frame, like a bird popped in, and you didn't want to get rid of the frame, you could just go and say, oh, let's open up frame 15 in Photoshop. And I could just
clone it out or do whatever you need to do. Yeah, cool.
So I like doing that batch rename so it's nice and clean. And at this point, we're ready to head over to After Effects.
Okay.
So we've got our shots, and we're going to head on over to After Effects. Now, what we do here is we simply import this, and you said it before, an image sequence.
Yep.
It's a bunch of still images that are going to play back as a movie.
Right.
So I double-click at the project window and navigate to that shot. Grab the first one.
Okay.
Okay.
There it is, number 1.
Tell it that this is a sequence.
Okay.
And it's going to go in order automatically, so that's fine.
Okay.
I click open.
And that's where that renaming came in handy because it's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on.
Computers don't like to count.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's easy. And there's the image sequence. Now, in this particular case, you know, these are JPEGs, and I didn't shoot at maximum quality. I was shooting at medium quality. You see they're about 4,200 pixels wide. Okay. Still double the resolution,
and you decided to shoot JPEG. We discussed in previous episodes that you could shoot RAW, but in this case you shot JPEG. Okay.
A 4-second interval would have been a far enough interval that the memory card could have kept up for RAW.
Right.
I was shooting RAW on one camera and JPEG on the other, and quite bluntly, it was a test of my manhood. Could I get it? Could I shoot it JPEG and not rely on RAW?
Gotcha.
I was shooting manual, flying without a chute. You know, there was only one parachute. If I got it, I got it. If I didn't, splat.
Sorry. Yeah.
So I got it.
Okay, cool.
And it's here, and here's the shot. And if we double click, it opens up, and you see, you know, okay, it's in the player window. You could drag through.
Okay.
It's fine. You know, but we want to go ahead and put this into a composition that's sized for what we need.
Right, for your end product. You know, the time frame that you need, the frame rate, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So if I need a composition, and let's say I needed this for delivery to HD TV, and I was going to do this, and I wanted a rate of 23,976.
Okay.
You know,
which is commonly a lot of programs I work on. They'll, even though they will end up being broadcast at 29.97, the editorial project's 23.98. That's fine.
Or we can go to 29.97. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Let's just use 23.98. That's fine.
And I'm going to say I need this shot to be 60 seconds long because it's going to be the underlying basis for a commercial.
Okay.
Like there's this one shot and stuff's going to happen on top of it.
Text floating on top of it or something like that.
Yeah. So I click OK. Duration 60:00. And there's a composition, and I could drop this in.
Okay.
Now, right now, it's not long enough.
Yeah, it looks like it's like 12, 13 seconds, something like that.
Yeah, and we could change some of that.
Okay.
First off, I'm going to make sure that I conform this to the correct frame rate. Okay. So if I go ahead and interpret the footage and choose main, I could say, oh, assume that this clip is 23,976.
Okay.
And you see.
There you go. You can drag it out. It's longer.
It's longer.
Okay.
Well, that's fine, and we're going to stretch this in a moment. But obviously, you know, I wasn't sure what frame rate I wanted. In the camera, I shot this, and it's going to come out to be about 15 seconds long.
Right.
And, you know, back in Bridge, if you look at my first shot of the day, you know, if we saw that, let's just take a look here in sort of our metadata view. We see that the first shot was, you know, 940.
Okay. And
the last shot of the night was at 106. So basically, if you back time that, 1240 to 106, it was about a 30-minute shoot.
Okay.
So I condensed 30 minutes down to 15 seconds.
Okay.
That's about as long as you could really milk a sunset.
Yeah.
So it's fine here, but I want to change the speed.
Okay.
So this is all fine. Here's the shot. And you say, well, I'm not seeing everything I want. Well, let's go ahead and size this first off.
Right, because this is actually a what is the image sequence? 4288 by 2848. So quite a bit bigger than the actual composition frame size.
Yeah. So I could just twirl that down under transform.
Oh, there's the Space Needle.
Yeah. But what's kind of cool that a lot of people don't think about is just like you would do motion control or pan and scan on a still, you can do on a time lapse.
Oh, cool. So I could push into it, I could animate across it, do whatever I want.
We could say, you know, let's start a little tighter here on the Space Needle and just adjust my anchor point and scale, not position, because anchor point is sort of the virtual where it's panning, and that's going to give you smoother motion than using position keyframes.
All right, so there's the Space Needle. Got it.
And I want to sort of start there. I say, you know, dead center.
Okay.
We'll turn on the keyframes. And I say, okay, you know, when it's about halfway through that shot, I want it to go ahead and pull out a little bit and just adjust the anchor frame, the anchor point there, so that shot is framed up how I want it.
Okay. Looks good.
Yeah. And, you know, so we can sort of see that right now, we can go ahead and preview.
Okay.
And it does the zoom in post.
Cool. So not only do we have movement from within the shot, we also have added a bit of movement to make the shot look a little more interesting by keyframing its anchor point and its scale. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you could do some of this during production if you had
like a slider, a motorized slider.
A motorized slider with a motorized telescopic head and a few $1,000s.
Sure.
Or you could do it afterwards, and you can do these nice, simple zooms or pans. And you see there, you know, it's showing us what we wanted.
Cool.
Now, that's all fine. I'm just going to remove those keyframes for a second here, but know that you can add zooms and pans, and we'll come back to that in a moment.
Yep.
But we've got this here. I say, you know what? It's not the right timing. I wish that this was a longer shot.
Okay.
So let's just sort of frame that up again, and we can do time changes here with a speed change.
Okay.
So we can have that where we want it. If we go ahead and right-click here for columns.
And we talked a little bit about speed changes in a previous episode as well. So if you haven't checked out that episode, you might want to go back and take a look at doing some speed changes in After Effects.
Yeah. And I could just click that, and I could say, you know what? Stretch that 200%.
Okay.
Nice whole numbers. And by default, what's going to happen here with the stretch, if it's at regular quality, is it's basically just repeating. And in this case, 200%, it's saying frame 1, then 2,
right, sure.
frame 2. You know, and it's holding it for 2 frames. So it's really, in this case, playing it back sort of like 12 frames a second.
Got it.
And truth be told, you know, on a time lapse, since it's already stop motion sort of, you don't really notice that. It looks pretty smooth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that gives you that ability. If you want to go a step further, though, you can turn on frame blending.
Okay.
And then you've got these modes here. That's draft mode.
Okay.
And that'll do blurring between the frames. So if you've got fast motion time lapse,
if you had a lot of traffic or something like that coming through, sure.
Yeah, that'll go ahead. Or if you know, if it was a windy day and you wanted the clouds to be a little bit smoother, or you can go a step further and flip that one more time to full quality mode.
Okay.
And it'll go even higher quality. Just takes longer to render.
Sure. So we brought it in, we've stretched it out, we've done some motion on it. Now, how do I actually get this out of After Effects? You know, I need to put it into my NLE to work with it. What's the next step?
If it's Premiere Pro, you could just drop the After Effects project into the timeline like a clip, and then render it, and it'll play there.
Okay.
That's fine. Then that creates a dynamic link. So if you were to jump back into After Effects,
make a change or something, it'll go ripple back through there.
It would update.
Okay.
But for anybody else, all you do is you say composition,
Yep.
add to render queue.
Okay.
And this puts it in the render queue down here.
Yep.
Let's just press the tilde key, and that'll go full screen. And by default, a lot of people screw this up. They say, best settings, lossless. That's what I want.
Right.
This is going to write a movie in the animation codec.
Which is a kind of an antiquated codec that people use for years, but it's, more importantly,
ginormous.
Dynamic file sizes, all sorts of issues with it, yeah.
It won't play in real time. It'll skip no matter how fast the hard drive, it'll drop frames. It's just not efficient.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is, you'll start here with the render settings, and we'll say best, full, that's fine, full size, use the frame rate, all that's good. So I can leave that alone. I don't have to change that.
You could set a custom a custom duration if you wanted to, but it's fine.
Lossless here, we're going to change this.
Okay.
So we're going to say, okay, we're going out to QuickTime.
Yep.
That's fine. And it's going to render out the color channels. I can go to the format options.
Oh, and here's where I can actually choose the codec. So if I was using ProRes or an Avid codec or whatever it may be, I can choose to render out to the specific codec.
Yeah, let's say we were going out to Avid, you know, Avid DNX HD. You know, all set there. I can go into the specific codec settings, assign the color levels, everything else. You know, if we were using ProRes, you know, 422 there, same sort of thing. Now, if you were going to go to 422, I would recommend setting your After Effects comp to 16-bit, which we'll do in a moment. Everything else is fine for quality. I looked that all down. There's no audio in this case. I said that's good. Well, instead of this just saying, oh, custom QuickTime, click right here and you could say, make a template.
Oh, so you don't have to choose it every time.
Yeah. And so I could say, oh, well, you know what? That's ProRes 422.
Got it.
And what you can also do is even say, that is my default template. So always choose that. So then in the future, it'll always render that.
Well, because, you know, I'm not an After Effects user to the degree that you are, and I've screwed that up a million times.
Yeah.
I think, oh, it's got to be the last settings I used, and it's not.
No. So you can set that. You may want to go under your project settings there at the bottom of the file menu and set this to be an actual 16-bit per channel. Okay. So you got a wider color range.
Sure.
We're rendering out in this case to a 10-bit codec, but you need to be in 16-bit space to go to a 10-bit or a 12-bit codec.
Sure, gotcha.
Got it all set. Name the destination. You know, it's all fine. Click render. And then it just runs. And the cool thing is that you saw there, because we didn't have to load all the frames into memory, you can load a clip, set a beginning frame, stretch it very fast, make all those decisions, dump 20 of them into the render queue, and then go get lunch.
That's great. Well, I mean, obviously, I think this is a pretty powerful and efficient workflow. I mean, I will say that I'm one of those people that, I mean, I know After Effects okay, but I'm still intimidated by it from time to time. And I think that, you know, just when we're watching this here, that it is pretty approachable. I mean, just a few easy steps. So organize and bridge, you know, get rid of frames that you don't want, bring that in as image sequence into After Effects, you know, interpret it to whatever frame rate that you need, throw it onto a sequence, time stretch it if you want. And the coolest part I got, you know, is the idea of sort of adding an additional bit of motion on it by animating in and out using some of the transform properties. And then, yeah, it's just a quick render. Take that file, pump it into your NLE, and incorporate it with the rest of your show.
Yeah, it's really not that bad. There's about 5 steps, and like I said, you are using less than 1% of After Effects power, but just because it's so fast at this,
but I suppose if you were a power user, you could figure out a million different ways to incorporate that into 3D space, you know, and all sorts of stuff, you know?
Particle effects.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah. But for anybody, this should be approachable. It's a very usable technique, and I've been doing time-lapse for a long time. This, hands down, is the fastest way to do it.
Well, very cool.
Okay. Thanks for joining us. My name's Rich Harrington.
And I'm Robbie Carmen.
And be sure to head on over to CreativeCow.net, where you can check out other video podcasts, as well as the DSLR forum and Creative Cow magazine. Thanks for joining us.